Yo, yo,
Well, if you're on
check, check.
Clubhouse, you can fast forward a lot of that because Pro had a lot of technical difficulties. So
Understatement.
15 minutes in, fast forward there. We had a couple people in there. I guess they left. Um, so yeah, today we're talking about intro words, the word tangential or tangent, or you're off topic. Sorry. So the word tangent, is an actual word. It's mathematical. Uh, as I just looked it up, opposite over adjacent. So I don't like when people say, "Oh, sorry to go off on a tangent," or if someone were to say, "Oh, that person, yeah, they go off on so many tangents." It's like, well, it's an actual. A tangent is an actual thing. Like it's not like they're just going off on some non-existent place. So I think the word tangent is really like the word when people say, "Oh, this is so deep," or "Oh, that was so long." It's one of these words that people use against introverts
Right.
to say like, "Why can't you just stay on topic
Mm,
or keep it brief or go from point A to point B?" It's like, well, as we've talked about before, you need context a lot of times to help people understand the whole thought process, the big picture of what you're trying to say.
right.
So you have a thought that pops in your mind, and you're like, "Oh, that's related to this. I need to bring that in, or I want to say that." For whatever reason, you feel the need to talk about it,
Hmm.
but because people feel like, "Oh, we have to be brief." They're like, that information wasn't pertinent or it wasn't necessary for me to hear. So what I think
Right.
tangent really is about is the fact that people have been taught to think very, as I always say, literally, linearly, logically. Linearly and logically, to where every answer is about a fact. So if you raised your hand in school and you had like a extra thought, like, "Oh man, wouldn't it be cool if Bernard? No, we don't have time for that. Like that's not part of what we're learning. Just tell me the answer." And
Mm,
then you're on news shows. It's like if you want to give some more context, it's like, "Well, we got 30 seconds. Can you just give us the answer in 30 seconds?" Like I could, but it's not going to be the whole answer. It's going to be some brief surface level answer that doesn't really get any deeper than what you guys already talked about. So I think when people say tangent, what they're saying is I don't have the ability to
to
free
follow.
associate,
Right.
think. So keep it here down this one tunnel for me.
Yep.
Because yeah, when I think of something like, or you watch like a Kanye interview, you can kind of watch how he's going like thought to thought and part, and you're like, wait, what is this person doing? Like where are they going? They're connecting
Right.
dots in their head, and because you're not in their head, you may not be able to see the dots they're connecting, but it is connected. So I think that's
Sure.
why I always argue everybody needs to have their own associative hopscotch. I always call it like mental hopscotch. You need to have your own sort of ability to hopscotch because you know I shouldn't have to always explain every single thing. You should be able to have your own hopscotch in your own mind. You'd be like, okay, I see how he got from there to there. But I feel like the burden is always put on the introverts to be when people are like, I didn't get that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you need a metaphor and you need to be able to verbal hopscotch.
Right. Yeah. Tangent's a funny line. By the way, are you hearing me okay? Or
Yeah.
is there an echo?
No
No
echo.
echo? All right. I hear the echo because of the way that I'm set up. But as long as you guys aren't, I'll just deal with it. Um, Tangent in math confused me, truthfully. When I first got the definition of tangent, it never made sense because it was so abstract. Like you said, opposite over adjacent. It's like, what? How is that the definition? I was like, no, no, no. It's got to mean something else because in calculus, you find the tangent line, right?
Right.
It's the line that just kisses the line but doesn't cross the path, right? It's like, okay, we're going to have a tangent. There's going to be a curve, and we're going to find that tangent with a linear equation for a curved line, right? And you can approximate it. Like, I mean, if you have a curve, right? I don't mean to make it too mathy, but if you got a curve, that's not very curved. We have my mouse that's kind of curved here, and I said we want to imagine a straight line going this way at this point right here. Where's the change line? I mean, you can imagine it, you might have to fudge it a little because you don't know if it's quite there or quite there, but you can basically draw it. You can basically see it. And I was like, why do we got to do all this complex calculation just to do something that I can sort of see? But it had to do with exactness and ensuring that that line wouldn't cross through the other curved line at another point, or else you'd violate it, right? So, to your point with the definition, it's without stepping over the boundary and shifting the whole conversation totally into another realm. But there's always a tangent, just like there's always a metaphor.
Right.
Tangent is, and in calculus, it's the same thing. There's infinite amounts of tangent lines that you can draw at that point. It's just that, um, well, I should say there's infinite tangents you can draw because you can put the point anywhere. The point might
Right.
be here. You can put it anywhere you want. And you can have infinite lines come off of that, but there's only going to be one that's truly tangent, right? So a lot of times we throw it around and say, yeah, I'm going to go off in a tangent, and sometimes there isn't a tangent there. I mean, you see people do non sequiturs which are way off. Be like, oh, that reminds me, and everyone's going, okay, you have to do a lot of fill in the blank to get me on your train of thought if it doesn't
Right.
have an apparent connection. It's just like if I just said, yo, I'm like the sun because I'm cold. You'd be like, what? Well, yeah, I'm like the sun because I'm cold. And it's like, well, no, that's not a good simile. That's not a good metaphor. Like, that's the opposite of what we
Right.
mean. If you have to lead me down that heavy, like, you may have taken me truly on a non sequitur that there's no return from, and you just hijacked the entire conversation without hope of bringing it back, right? So
Right.
there's a line which we can't cross, is my point, you know. And when you do, you've hijacked, and when you do it correctly, or anything on this side of the border, there's a line that'll get you back to that curve.
Right. Yeah, I think, yeah, I always talk about, I don't remember if I talked about it on the show, but I said I came up with this progression of what I think um should be for conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
like phase one is your personal time with yourself. Phase two would be like you and a counselor or a friend. Phase three is
Right.
like public discourse. So in the first two phases, you're organizing your own thoughts. And then phase one, you're organizing your own thoughts, reflecting, philosophical. Phase two, you're bouncing it off a counselor, getting professional, like, oh yeah, I do need to work that out. Phase three is like, hey, we're amongst the public, let's get solutions. Like, this is not your personal time to work out your thoughts. And I feel like some people, they don't like, they're not self-aware. So when they're in the public, they'll be like, they'll just start talking about things that are important to them, which is not wrong. It's just, this is not, we don't have enough time for you to like search your soul right now. Like, you're supposed to do soul searching in your private time, your practice time, and now we're all here to rehearse. Like, I love that meme. There's practice, then there's rehearsal. Like, practice is what you do. You learn your part. You learn the bass line. You learn the drum part. Rehearsal is what we all do together. Now it's like working out the kinks, but not, oh, right, that's right, I'm supposed to learn the chord progression. No, you should have done that. So I think, yeah, if someone is in a meeting and they go off on a quote unquote tangent, that's more like self-pleasuring, like, oh man,
Mm.
yeah, this is making me think, and oh man, I'm really, it's like, okay, like, to a certain degree, maybe you're kind of wanting people to relate to you or experience that with you, but I don't know if that's for us all to do right now. Or maybe you have a specific meeting that's like, hey, we want everyone to come together and talk about their experience, then you should
Mm.
do that. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you have the tangent, it's like you're saying, like, all these lines, like anywhere along the path could come. And I think that tangent, that wiggle room has to be there, because you said metaphor. I was going to connect it to that too. If you're on the line, you can't always see the perspective you need to see because you're on the line. When you step away on a tangent, it's like, oh, that's what the line looks like from this side.
Right.
You know, that's what I always talk about, the metaphor. When you step away from the thing itself and talk about the metaphor, you go, oh, I get some distance now. So I have some clarity
Mm-hmm.
in what we're talking about. Because I remember one time, it was this, I use this all the time now. One time I went somewhere, and I used to live in the neighborhood, and I was driving around there, and I was like, I used to live here. I know these streets. So I'm driving up and down the streets looking for this Goodman Street or something. and I travel every street, and I was like, yo, how am I not finding this? And then I realized, I was like, yo, I'm actually on the street. Like I'm looking for the street left and right. I'm literally on the street I'm looking for. And I was just like, yo, that's life. Like you can't be on the street or the thing you're looking for trying to find it because you're too close. You're literally on it. You have to step off of the line onto the tangent streets.
It's so big that you can't see it.
Right.
I used to say that when I was little. It's so big, you just can't see it. Back to math. The other reason why I found tangent confusing is I never fully understood that there was a frame of reference. Like, in other words, we needed what we would call theta. We would need an angle of reference. And I was like, adjacent and opposite. Well, how do I know which one's which? And I had to have somebody break it down. I remember first trying to break it down in the book and going, okay, adjacent, that means like next to. And opposite, what does that mean? You know, I was like, and I've said it here before on the show a couple of times, have been like opposing sight. Like exactly straight across from where you're looking would be opposing sight of you, right? So I'm like, okay, that's across from me. And how do I know which one is adjacent? Because I got two sides. And it was like, oh, the hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse. Like that's the true measuring rod. We have the longest side is part of the definition of hypotenuse. So that one gets special title. It's the other one that's going to be opposite, but opposite switches with adjacent depending on where you are. Because if we're not the right angle, you know, if we're not sitting where we think theta would be, like what if theta was the right angle? Like I would have come up with all these things before I really understood what we're talking about. And it still has to do with your frame of reference.
Right.
You know, because you got two angles that aren't the right angle. And which one are we talking about? And that will shift things a little bit. And that shift, almost like shifting the conversation, it's like what becomes tangent or tangential in this case actually depends on where you're standing in the first place, which is just an interesting point. So what one person may find tangential, another person might find adjacent, if you get what I mean.
Right.
Or if we use in math terms, could find sine or could find cosine, you know, which are weird words to begin with, right? When we think of relationships. And for the non-math folks, there's three names that we give when we're talking about angles. We talk about sines, we talk about cosines, and we talk about tangents. When we do the whole SOHCAHTOA thing, you might have learned in trigonometry. And then to confuse it even more, then we start talking about x and y. And we're like, wait a minute, y is sine and x is cosine? Like someone might come and tell you that at some point, but you got all these other names. And then let alone the fact in trigonometry, we confuse people even more. And h all of a sudden is now r. And it's like, well, why is it r? Oh, it's because we got a circle, and the radius of the circle, which is not always told to you, is going to be, for effective purposes, the hypotenuse if we were looking at a triangle. So it's like a triangle subscribed on this circle, well, subscribed on a graph with this circle that we superimpose. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of metaphors to begin with. You have to imagine there's a circle, imagine there's a triangle, imagine there's a Cartesian coordinate system in the first place to think about where we are in space. And that's a lot of competing geometric entities we've thrown in. And only when you know which metaphor we're talking about, do you know whether it's r, do you know whether it's h, do you know whether it's cosine, sine, x, y? There's a lot there. And to even deal in this schema, you have to have comprehension for where you are, when certain things fit and apply. And I like to break that up when I'm in meetings, when I'm on a stage or whatever, and use mixed metaphors, right? Come in with a metaphor that doesn't fit the situation, and sometimes mix them. And I get so frustrated when people can't follow the mixed metaphors. It's like, yeah, I know I was using circle over here, but I just switched to triangle. Come on, we do it in math, you know. And again, maybe this is why we lose people, right? But a lot of people, I feel, get lost because they're not trying to follow the metaphor sometimes. It's
Yeah.
like, I know it takes a little, you see certain people in meetings that have to have everything laid out. Be like, wait a minute.
Right.
It confuses me. It's like, come on, follow the bouncing ball. Keep up, But we always have to remember that everybody has not been along for the whole walk that we're asking them to walk for us. And it can be frustrating.
Yeah. I'm gonna respond to that in a second. But the first thing I was gonna say is, it's tangent is opposite over adjacent, right? So
Right.
the word adjacent is interesting. People use that word very coldly now. They're like, "Oh, you hip hop? Well, I'm hip hop adjacent." Adjace.
Right.
Like, people love saying that now. He's not hip hop. He's hip hop adjace. So people know what this word means. They know it means next to, in the vicinity, close, like
in the area, right?
Flirting with. But you can't say you're truly from the essence. But you're close enough that someone might say, "Oh yeah, all right, we'll put our arm around you. You can be in here for a minute or two."
Yeah.
So it's not that people don't understand adjacent. It's just like you're saying, the work that required to think about the adjacent things. Because think about it, if you're driving a car, you're focused. You're supposed to be focused. Like, center lane, lines, this car, blind spot, rear view. Like, you're very much focused on the path. Not like, oh, trees. Oh, because that would be a tangent that could cause, harm to you, whoever's in the car, the person. So I can understand why people don't want to veer off the line towards the tangent, because
going off on a tangent can be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're doing something physical, or if you're running a race, you're obviously like, 50 meter dash, like, you want to be not tangential, because that's could cause you to lose some speed, cause you to lose, add some seconds onto your time. So yeah, there's a time where tangents don't make sense. But we're getting into the thought realm. Like, tangents exist for, well, here's I was talking to somebody recently, and I was saying, like, think about a river. See, we're doing the metaphor jumping right now. Think about like a river, and then a river has tributaries. I was like, are those things non-relevant? And I was like, ooh, contributing tributaries. They're like, they're
contribute to them.
Yeah. Like, they relate, and they have a reason that they're there. Either they were formed, or they speak of the whole ecosystem. Yeah. So they're not, you don't say, oh, look at this river. Oh, and those little things over. No, there's a name for them, right? The scientists said, no, these are the tributaries that branch off. So whether they're there just because they're like, I think it's almost like tributaries are just kind of ornaments almost. Well, this is like the actual river. People bathe, get water for their livestock, wash things. But those tributaries just formed over time. It's like, but they're still there. Like, again, you acknowledge them, you define them. So I would say the same thing with the mind tributaries or the tangents. For whatever reason, they're there to contextualize your thoughts. Over time, you thought about, like, I don't know, what is family to me? And then you read a book, or you heard a song, or you watched a movie. So those movies, books, and songs aren't directly giving you like the main core of your worldview, but they have influenced it, or have branched off into that, and they matter to you. Because if I just took away your favorite movies, your favorite songs, your favorite books, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like, that has significance to me. It's just a tributary though. Like, I know family's important to you, but that movie about family, who cares? And you're like, no, I like that scene. It reminds me. So these things matter. And so it's not till they're taken away that I think people then go like, oh, right. So you have to keep those tangents. And I think it's like we talk about with like the neuroplasticity, the brain, neurons that form, like, they form and they're there for a reason, because they create like the ecosystem of the mind.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Even the like what I was saying when we were speaking about that, like, we're going to give a tribute to, and you think about what a tribute is. It's when we pay special attention or focus to a particular point, right? So the tributary could be the focus at any one time. And even when you think about a tangent, I was also thinking, as I was saying it, is that all tangents are straight lines. So to your analogy of the race, all people appear to be running in a straight line, or they, like you said, they want to, or they lose speed, right? Or they would be inefficient. Not they lose speed, but they wouldn't get there as fast, right? And to everyone running on a tangent, it's always a straight line. It's the curve that's curved. The tangent's the straight part. And there's infinite ones, we said, that could just be going off. The only thing that's determining what's different is the slope of that line. But again, it's a slope from a frame of reference, because it's like,
Right.
well, this sloped line really just depends on where you're looking at it from, right? The line's just a line. It's like, this is the line too, but it just depends our frame of reference where our eye is. So it's just interesting that the tangent is only a tangent to the people observing. To the person who are on the tangent course, it's just a natural straight line that's running
Right.
adjacent to the point, or parallel
Right.
to the point, if you will, almost. And I've always liked that too, with the, when you're solving for systems of equations, getting in my jam here, I'm trying to stay away, but you're solving for systems of equations. The only time you don't have a solution is when the lines are parallel and they never intersect. And it helps define what you mean when you say a solution. A solution couldn't get any more tangential if you're using it in the informal way we were, meaning to cross the path, right? Like you don't want the tangent line to break the line, but when you do this, that's when you have a solution. Interesting that you got one line going this way, one line going this way. You have a break-even point essentially. But if those lines keep going on infinitely, they couldn't be going in more opposite directions. Literally, when we find a solution to a system of equations, we're finding a place at which they couldn't be more opposite, right? Especially when we bring into play the most perfect type, and there's a word for that, kind of a fun word like adjacent that we don't say in normal speech. I mean, outside of 3 situations in life, I can't think of a time we'd ever use the word adjacent. Like you said, the examples you gave, but I would also say park adjacent, over there next to the adjacent lot, right? We say it with parking a lot of times. It's adjacent to the, whenever we given direction where we're going to park our car for some reason, it seems we get like an adjacent lot, right? Or the culturally relevant way that you're using it, right? Or in math. Outside of that, we don't just say, "Hey, over there, adjacent to the bush, could you go get that?" No one says that, right?
Adjacent to the
But it's
bush.
interesting. No one really does that with perpendicular too, which is a fancy word, right? Like
Right.
we only say that in math context, or unless we're building a house. I mean, every angle in this room is perpendicular, or it's a
Right.
45-degree angle. You as an architect would know it's almost the absolute exception when there's anything other than a 45 or a 90-degree angle. And 90 degrees make those perpendiculars, and everything else is just half of that. It's very interesting though that we can build an entire mansion, and very rarely do we need to build anything that's outside of those kind of cultural norms, if you will. And in conversation, I think it follows suit. It's very much, oh, here's the turn, better make it perfectly right angle, or we're going to loosen to, oh, don't curve,
Right.
there's not a lot of room for the gradual sloping curve yet. A lot of times in the arts or whatever it is, or having a nice conversation, you want to gradually do something. But yet in a lot of architecture, it's, of course there's curves in architecture, but I'm saying if you're just building a house structurally sound, there's not many of them to be found. It's just interesting.
Right. Well, yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying about the point of reference. So if I'm the person speaking in a meeting or a conversation, I'm the one who's in my own mind thinking about the story that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know all of the tangents and the intersecting lines that are part of the core circle of my story.
Right.
So when someone's listening, they already are at a disadvantage because number one, they have to hear you tell the story. Oh, yeah, tell us that story. What happened? Blah, blah, blah. But there's all these other things informing your story, like you saw these tangents. And to you, they're connected because it's like, well, this is part of the diagram of my story. But for the people listening, it's like it's hard for them for whatever reason to understand why that was something you mentioned. Like it seems like it was so extra. Like why did we need to hear that detail? Just give us the juicy, the main part. But that's why I always talk about everybody having their own metaphor, right? So I think the people listening should have enough of tangents, tributaries, so that they don't have to be like, oh, I can't follow that. You have your own kind of map in your head of like, okay, I don't 100% know why that's there, but I have my own reference of my own story. So okay, I get he said that for a reason, or he probably needed to say that, or thought we would have been left out, or lost us. So I think, like I said, I think a lot of time the tangent is placed on the speaker as if like, oh, you're like, I guess that's what I don't like about it. It kind of characterizes the person as like, you're confused about your own thinking. Like you don't even know what you're thinking, or like you need to simplify this story. You need to tell it some more, like practice telling this story at home or something before you tell us, because somehow it's too long, and so you need to shorten it for the audience. And it's like, no, like I know what I'm talking about. But I guess here's what it is. I mean, there is some truth to it, but not for the reasons that I just mentioned. Like a person shouldn't have to shorten their story because everybody else is like, oh, it's taking so long. But as we know as performers, there is some level of like, okay, does the audience actually need this part? Like I want to say it. Like I want to include this bar. I want to include this line. I want to include this instrument, this note. And it would make me feel like, yeah, every time I'm watching it, like, yeah, that was the thing. But you also know there's some level of just, okay, I guess I need to sacrifice, what they say, kill your darlings. You got to kill some of your like favorite lines, your favorite characters for the sake of the whole. So I do understand on some level, because if there's limited time, limited audience attention, there is some sense of like, okay, what scenes can be cut from the movie, what lines can be cut from the poem, what things can be cut from the art piece. But I don't think you should ever do that because it's like done out of shame, or like this kind of like voice in your head of like, this is too long. Like, I don't know, if I'm sitting around with friends telling the story and like we just chilling, like what do you care if the story takes an extra few minutes? Right? I mean, if you really got to go somewhere, I guess. But if I'm just telling you, oh, yo, guess what happened to me yesterday, and then I mention that, because you can see how people kind of tune out too. You're like, so I was going down the street, right? Oh yeah, there's a store. You guys ever been in a store? Yeah. And they're like, uh-huh. They're like in the back of their head. Once you reach that point, they're going, yeah, back to the main thing. So I think it's like we're saying, there's something about some people. You take them off the path, their mind is like, how am I going to get back to the story? But I think that's the thing about the introvert, the creative. Like I never feel like life is a line. It's always this winding path. Like whenever I do a clubhouse walk and talk outside, I start with an idea. I go here's all these branches and tributaries, but the whole time I'm holding true to the center. Like I'm always wanting to come back to my main thought, but I have to go out to all these places to like gather things and bring them back in. But my goal is to always bring you to a destination. I never just want to leave you with a talk that was like, oh, that was a lot of mixed bag of thoughts. It's like, no, there was a point. There was a clear point, and there was a clear destination. There was a clear call to action. But I'm not going to go just point A to B to get you there. I have to travel to point A, B to B to C, C to B, B to A, mix B with Z. Like it's never going to be a straight path.
So I guess the question comes, do you want and prefer to be in conversations that have lots of tangents?
I don't know if I prefer, other than I just know it's a reality. It's not like, yay, tangents. It's just like,
yeah.
I kind of know that if we're going to have any rich discussion, the person's going to have to go talk about this thing over here for 10 minutes to get me. I call it groundwork. Like a lot of times I'll do a thing on Clubhouse and I was like, I wasn't even trying to talk about this, but I have to say this in order for you to understand what I'm going to say for the next 20 minutes. Otherwise, you're going to be confused. Yep. So I think for some people, they think the tangent is confusing because they're like, why are you going here and then here? Whereas I'm like, well, the tangent is going to clear up. Tangent is going to be more efficient because I'm going to talk for the next hour about this. And this 10 minutes is worth me talking about to make sure the next hour is clear.
Yeah, I don't even think I have the ability to stop the tangents from coming. And I've got to the point where I'm okay with that. Like I just share it. I'm very in my Yo That's Pro song. That's what the whole song was really about. It was like, this is I'm just wearing what's on my sleeve. As it comes to me, like I do in freestyles, I just say it. I just go with it. I just trust the process that's going to take me where I want to go. Now, once in a while, I'll say something. I go, I probably shouldn't have said that because of this crowd isn't going to appreciate it, or it's going to miss the mark. It's too high or it's too low, right? Very rarely is it because there's a certain special person in the room or there's a different crowd. It's normally the collective of the crowd. Like I'm going, the collective consciousness in this room is not ready for this or is not there.
Right.
There hasn't been scaffolding. Very
Right.
rarely is it, oh, I
Scaffolding.
wouldn't want someone to know this about me. It's not like a
Right.
me thing where it's like, oh, they don't know this pro, or they don't know, like my goal
Right.
is to get you to know all of me at some points. That would be more convenient. So I don't have to ever compartmentalize with identities and that kind of stuff. I was talking about that at the conference the other day. I was rapping to these kids it was a quantum thing, as I was telling you about, and like there were a bunch of military students there it was at the Naval Academy, obviously, so there was a lot of contribution from students and so forth, and everyone kept waiting for the students to come in the room. Like there's a bunch of adults sitting around and we're like, oh, we know the bus with the kids are coming soon. And one bus was college, it was like Morgan State, and the other one was high school kids from like Baltimore, right? And you should see how people changed the tone of how they were speaking once the kids came in the room. It was palpable. And I'm
Right.
like addressing this point to the students, and I'm like, you want to be in a place. I don't know how well I did getting this point across, but my gist was you want to be in a place where you can just be who you are. And
Right.
you don't always have that ability. I'm amazed at some people where I've been in certain institutions that I work at or whatever, where people dress exactly how I'm dressed right now and have no fear of repercussion. There's none. I mean, what freedom is that? They're in front of the president. They're dressed this way. They're chilling in any room. They have no kind of like fear that they didn't live up to the dress code, right? Dude next to you's bow tied out and your sneakers and sweatsuit. I've always felt a pressure with that. I've always compartmentalized that a little bit. And so I'm always trying to pass it off to other people and say, you want to get to a point where you could come in your swimsuit and no one would notice. You want to
Right.
get to the point where they know you so well and the work that you do that you are now liberated to be wearing what is truly you. I love in Neo in the Matrix when they say, this is I forget how we say it, but they say this is the digital residue of your mental image of yourself. Like Neo's like, what clothes am I wearing? They're like, this is how you see yourself because you're not really
Right.
here. And that's a dope concept. And so I bring that up for people well, I need to bring it up more often in this concise way and say, what is the digital residue and mental image that you have of yourself? In other words, where is your true center? So that you really know when you're going off on a tangent from your
Right.
identity, not just the conversation. When
Right.
is it that you're taking a risk, that you're going
Right.
on an offshoot where it's exciting because you've never necessarily gone in that direction? So I'm at the point where maybe I don't do it 100% with my clothes, but I probably do it a lot more than most. But I do it with my words because once I feel the metaphor coming in, I don't care how off it is. I'm going to connect it for you. And if you didn't get it
Right.
the
Right.
first
Right.
time, at some point it's on you. I'm going to try to help you get there. But if you don't get it, I'm like, I don't feel bad that I went on that tangent.
No, I get it. I like the identity part. But yeah, what you said too, I've said that too, in that it's like a tightrope walker. You're like, oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
like how are they going to get from this side to that side? There's no way. It's so far apart. They're going to fall surely. So
Mm-hmm.
that moment of idea here meets idea there. Everyone else is like, this person, man, you should have never got on that tightrope walk because you're about to hit
You're
splat.
about to fall. We're here to watch the roadkill.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you do it, they're like, what? Like,
Yo.
how did you do this?
Right.
So I like I like this idea of the true north, the true core, and then like how far do you veer off? And then what you're saying,
Which is
it is
only
tied
true
to
to
identity. Huh?
I mean, that true north too, even in that concept, it's only true to you. Even that
Right.
concept of like north, it's like, we know that the North Pole is shifting slowly. We actually don't know why. We have no idea why. I mean, we have guesses what's shifting. Like we know that there's iron in the core of the earth or whatever, but we don't
Right.
actually know what's going on in the core of the earth that's making this shift, right? And so every year it does shift a tiny bit. And it's like, does it matter? The answer is kind of not really. It's like, does it really matter? Like we think there's some seismic thing going on. We hear that word all the time, right? And that
Right.
makes you go, whoa, a seismic shift. And it's like, well, in this capacity, is it really a big deal that the North Pole is shifting? Is like the world going to spin off, into deep space? No, it's not. But I bring that point up from off tangent of your point. Even when we say things like true north, it's funny how not true those things are. It's just at some point we agree that there's something that we call dead up,
Right.
that we call east, west, north, and we come up with these. At least they're grounded to something here on Earth, right? That we do have a magnetic North Pole. But outside of that, it's arbitrary, right? Like, I mean, we make this point, and I sometimes have to make it more often in rooms and math and space, and we talk with flat earthers or what have you, is that the arbitrary nature of things like up and down in space, it's hard for us with our preconceived true north kind of thought that we have about ourselves, about our world, whatever, but that doesn't exist in the universe at large. There is no true north. Yeah, it's just an interesting concept,
Right.
that I'm always drawn to, is that your North Star is indeed your North Star,
Right.
because it could be the East Star for somebody else.
Well, I mean, it gets into a lot of things like with identity, for instance. I mean, I think, yeah, especially Americans are really in love with, like I said, predictability and data. So anything that's fixed, like people's favorite statement is like, well, we do know. Like people love to talk about what they know. So, like, yeah, if your identity is this thing which you have affixed to, say, a job, like I am a CEO, I've always been the CEO. Then when they lose that job, they're like, I'm not a CEO. When you look at these Enron people, like, yo, people take their lives, like Bed Bath and Beyond, people getting these scandals, they take their lives because they're like, that was my world, that was my true north. I come home and my wife is like, yes, you're the CEO, you are my dad. Their world gets rocked when something, pandemic, I can't work anymore, who am I? And it's like, well, your true north moved. So yeah, you of course is going to be shocked.
Wasn't that true?
Yeah. So the person who is constantly like living as a true human being knows that, like, yeah, there is a general core to who you are that never changes. But like I always talk about with the buildings, the skyscrapers, they got that little bit of flex room. The skyscraper has to stay its core because otherwise it would snap off, fall over. But also without the wiggle room from the wind and the shifting of the plates, it will snap off too. So you have to have some organicness. You have to have some that, like I said, wiggle room from the main line, because the tangent is like, hey, if you stay on this road, you will get there, but you will be bored. Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like people, let's get in the car and we're just going to go all right, kids, we're going on vacation to Disney World. Okay, Dad, can we stop? No rest stops, no pulling up, no sightseeing, straight. And it's like, oh, great, we love family vacation. It's like, if you're so if you're so like mainline focused, you miss the sort of winding paths, because people are so afraid. They're so afraid of taking the winding paths, like stop, smell the roses, take the scenic route. What if we get lost? It's like, well, sometimes you want to get lost. Like sometimes you want to like find your way through. Because that's what, when you were talking, the thing I just thought of was, okay, let's say I go into the forest, right? And I take the same path like every weekend. Well, after a while, I'm going to know a certain section of that forest very well, right? Now, unless I'm looking for new things in that same path, I'm going to probably be bored. It's like, okay, yeah, I've seen this rock, I've seen this true. But if I'm too afraid to venture off into other paths, I'm probably going to say, oh, well, okay, yeah, this path is okay. It's like, no, you know that core, you're so familiar with it that it's become too familiar. I was just talking about this today. Like you don't want to get it. You need routine, because routine is what helps give you structure. But then your routine becomes too routine to where you're bored. And people's like, how come I'm so bored? It's like, because you've literally allowed your routine to become the thing that defines everything. And there's no more surprise. There's no more mystery. So like you were saying about the identity. Yeah, if you get up on stage and you let this metaphor take you or pull you somewhere, that's because you know who you are. You know that true north. You're like, okay, I know I will return to this person, but right now I feel this metaphor is over here and I want it to take me there because I want to take that risk, because I want to gain some new discovery. Like I want to path of this forest because I want to discover something new. So I think, yeah, like identity, as you know, that's my thing too. But what you're saying is, people in the room, it's not just, oh, you're on a tangent. It's about identity. Like the people listening to a certain degree, it speaks to the fact of like, man, I would be afraid to get up there and do what he just did,
Mm-hmm.
because that would be a disaster for my reputation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like, oh, you're long-winded. It's like, that would ruin who I am. Like I'm known as Mr. or Mrs. like talk. You don't, like, people have their note cards and their pieces of paper because they like, I want to present myself as never messing up. Whereas you and I talk about all the time, it's like, dog, I've gotten on stage and said so many whack freestyles. Like I've gotten on stage and be like, please, I hope that's not being recorded because this is garbage. But I refuse to allow myself to get on stage and do the same thing over and over and be stagnant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it immediately makes me think of one of these Michael Jordan commercials they have out there where he's talking about all the missed shots he's had in his career.
Right.
You know, and think about all the freestyles gone wrong kind of thing. Whereas later in your career, when you're in the peak of your career, or after you've accumulated enough mileage, you don't really have those days as much. You know, I mean, there's some diminishing marginal return after where you physically maybe can't do it as well as you used to, but in a cognitive art like freestyling and so forth, that point is hopefully for most of us delayed much more. You know, as long as the brain is functioning, or there's no plaque buildup or anything like that. I can't understand why people talk about, yo, this dude fell off, and it's like, why did they hit some kind of physical wall? Like,
right.
Does the brain stop being active? I mean, I guess it does if you choose to, you know. But the Michael Jordan thing or whatever, you know, person is in that point of the commercial, it's just so interesting that even the mythological Michael Jordan is the one who never missed, always hit the big shot. And we're so selective. And we do this with hip hop culture quite a bit too. Like, I'm very outspoken about both my respect for the old school and my honesty about just how awful comparatively to now those artists actually are. I mean, you have to be able to say that. You have to be able to say, look, I have all the respect for Run DMC in the world, but as MCs, they're not really top tier. Nobody's putting Run DMC in their top 10. But in 1984, everyone would have had them in their top 10. There's a reason they're not in the top 10. There's a reason no one thinks about Oscar Robertson, except basketball purists, who had an average of triple-double for years in his career. That was a big thing, right? And now similar feats have been done in this era of basketball where people typically can get 10 assists and over 10 points and over 10 rebounds. And it's lost a little of its shine and allure. But when we watch the brand of basketball that's played today compared to the brand of basketball that was played in the 50s, I would beat every single person who ever lived in the 50s, right? like the average to terrible basketball player of today, right, would be a pro. But that's not how life works. It's on this spectrum, but we still selectively only remember the great things. Like, oh, Bob Cousy was the greatest dribbler ever. Dude, he couldn't dribble with his left hand. He dribbled around circles, you know, but the mythology is like, yo, it was perfect. And similarly, we have to remind people of that too, as performers, that again, when we first did it, or even just a couple of weeks ago, there might have been a bad performance or whatever, but on the whole, the risk is worth taking because we've taken so many risks at failure. It's brought us to a level of high reward. And that's the message, I think, for everything. And young people need to hear it more so than adults. I think most adults know this. Maybe they need reminder. But it is funny, to your point, about how often people go, oh, I could never do that, you know? And it's like, well, if you tried and stop saying that message at the same kind of events that are supposedly for STEM events where we want kids to be okay with failing. We're like, oh, I could never do a freestyle on stage. It's like, no, as PD, what you should be doing is getting up and freestyle. You should be feeling uncomfortable. She said, what scares you and what are you willing to do? Because I'm telling you, for most of the kids and a lot of the adults, it's math. You know, so what a great way to sort of get over it is try to, you know, do one of your fears, as long as it's not connected. It's not like my wife is scared of snakes. I don't want to I'm not going to go dangle a snake in front of her. I'm not saying that, but if there's something that, you know, you have a little fear about in a controlled room in a quote unquote safe space, you should be able to work on some of these things and get to a point where you feel better.
Yeah, this is great. We should do a STEM conference. It's called STEM and Fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're saying is, I mean, we're hitting on something that most people probably wouldn't like. This tangent has taken us to a place where we wouldn't have thought to go, and to me, that's the whole point. The tangent exists as a tool to take you to other geography. That's the thing I've been on recently.
I think as Robert Frost once said,
the geography of the mind. Like that's been my thing recently. Like there's like STEM land, and then there's like Imagination Island, right? And we've taught students a lot to live in STEM land, build up a lot of skyscrapers. And then Imagination Island, they go over there every now and then, build a little sand castle. So then when you meet someone else, this hit me there. There's like when you meet someone else who spent a lot of time on Imagination Island, you're like, there's no way I could relate to them. Like I have nothing on my island in Imagination. Like, can we go back to STEM land? Because I have lots of stuff there. And Imagination person's like, yeah, we could, but it's gonna be pretty boring after a while because you're just gonna keep showing me your skyscrapers and how many you have and how tall they are, and like you're gonna measure them and tell me how you're gonna give me a lot of quantification, and then I'm gonna be like, now can we come over here to Imagination Island where we can take some of that STEM stuff and like remix it and like take one of those skyscrapers and turn it upside down or spray paint it? Oh, why would we do that though? Like that doesn't make sense. That's not logical. It's like, yeah, I know that's why we would do it, because it's not logical. It's the counterpart to logic. It's taking things that are logic and truth and making them colorful so that you don't get bored. Oh, well, that's not practical or pragmatic, or how are you going to make money? And then you're just like, all right, man, go back to STEM land, like enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I have no problem visiting STEM. Huh?
You would love, I wish I had video of the conversation there. When I got up to do my thing, it was 5 minutes before the students were actually leaving. And I got frustrated. I got up there and I was like, all right, truthfully, y'all, people have paraded up here all day long. And not one of these people got up here and thought about hip hop. It was never mentioned. It was like, if I wasn't in the room, it wouldn't have happened, even though I'm in a room where I know plenty of people are hip hop fans, but no one mentions it because we're all in their suit mode. They're all in their STEM mode. I mean, this was literally quantum conference, trying to get young people in quantum, and they're literally lecturing from the stage for the whole day, boring everyone out. It was a great conference. Don't get me wrong. They covered all kinds of amazing topics, but it's a great conference for people who already get it. And everyone in these threads are patting ourselves on the back, like, what an amazing conference, what an amazing conference. And I'm like, okay, it's amazing in terms of content that we covered for ourselves. But in terms of from a student perspective, it could have been a lot better for the student. And the people who put it together, they did an amazing job trying to put all things in here, but the people didn't perform. Meaning the adults who were in charge, when they got up on the stage, they didn't speak the language of the students. So I said, I just want y'all to watch something. I said, just watch this for 1 second. I'm going to say a word. I'm going to say a couple words and a couple initials, and you're going to watch what happens. And I just went, NBA Youngboy. And they all, whoa! It was as if I said voodoo, right? And I said, I realize for you adults here, you don't know what I just said, right? But they do. And you see how they just reacted, right?
Right.
And so the thing is that there's a missing ingredient here. There's them over there, there's us over here, and there's not a lot of pathways that connect those. And you're lying to yourself if you don't want to acknowledge hip hop as the universal connector, because everyone in the crowd is a hip hop fan, or they speak hip hop.
Right.
And don't give me that, oh, there's always someone who doesn't like hip hop. No. Every single person in this crowd speaks hip hop more proficiently than you do, and you don't think it's your job to speak it at all. You are, you got to fill out like, what's your degree of fluency in the language when you put it on a job interview? You are 0. You are from 1 through 5. You are 0. You have no fluency in hip hop at all, and your students have the highest amount of cultural capital in hip hop. And so, as that going off on a tangent, that tangent doesn't exist for you. It's not an off ramp that you're able to take, and therefore you didn't capture the imagination of the people that are in front of you. And that's what hip hop does. It provides bazillions off ramps because we're in the land of imagination. We're in the land of metaphor, where anything goes. There's no rules. It's how creative you can be to capture the attention and the imagination of the people that are right in front of you. So it's frustrating.
gonna speak to that, but the thing I was gonna say is like, yeah, like I personally have no problem going into STEM land. I mean, we're working on something now with that.
Mhm.
It's just I don't live there. Like I go between like, oh, y'all want me to come to STEM? Oh yeah, this is dope. Oh yo, yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna remix it, I'm gonna bring it over here in the Imagination Island. So the artist person, like the artist creative person
Imagination
always
Nation.
Imagination Nation. Yeah, the artists, they always get
In
like
Imagination.
they always get characterized as like, oh,
Someone I
you don't
know
live in
said.
reality. It's like,
Mhm.
no, the artist visits reality because they know they need it. Like I don't say, oh, I'm gonna make something from nothing. I'm like, no, give me this block of clay, I'm gonna turn it into a sculpture. Like give me this curriculum that's boring and I'm gonna remix it. Like I'm not working with nothing. I understand I have to use the tools. I'm saying I just don't live there and stay there because I know it gets boring quickly. I also don't live in Imagination Nation all the time as well because I have to have a foundation for Imagination
Mr.
Nation.
Rogers had this worked out perfectly. I mean, he came in, took the sweater off. He didn't even tell you what he did during his day. You just knew he did something relatively cool, but we might not have found it cool, so he didn't go there. Like he might have been doing some STEM land. And in fact, we know his job, right? He's a puppeteer, and they're like, oh, like that's a pretty cool job. But he comes home from his day of work of being a puppeteer to do his puppeteer show, right? And then he goes into the land of imagination, literally and figuratively, right? And what was his land called? Make believe, right? Land of make believe, with Lady Elaine and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
Yep.
I love taking the journey with him. When the trolley went through and came on the other side, I'm there locked in because
Right.
I didn't really want to be in his apartment because his apartment was pretty dull.
Right.
There's not a lot going on there. You're like, wow, is this a halfway house? Like it doesn't even seem like a real residence anyone living. There was nothing going on. Everything's going on in the land of imagination. Now again, we have to know it's a land and know that we're taking the trolley there so that we also know we can come back. And the dream, we
Right.
wake up, we're on the cloud that floats and we come back and we're in our bed or whatever. That's a metaphor I'm using too from when I was little. I used to imagine I was on a bed and it floated over into cloud land. I don't know if I read this or saw it, but I would have the same dream all the time. And that's how my dream would begin and end when I was a little kid. I'd get on this little bed. There was a cloud and I'd float over. I'd be in imagination land. It was probably from Mr. Rogers for all I know.
Right.
But I knew when the dream was beginning and I knew, oh, here comes the fun, And I say this too, to your metaphor. Like there's no contest. People be like, oh, would you ever leave, teaching to go be a full-time rapper? I make the disclaimer. I say, I really like doing both. I mean, I call myself Professor Lyrical, right? There's some attractiveness to that. I'm not hoping for the call that comes on my door so that I can go be rapper 24/7. I just want to be able to control what I'm doing more, do more of it. There's a number I know that kind of works, but there's no
Right.
contest though between what's more fun, math or hip hop. It's like hip hop's here and math is like here. Math's something I'm good at. It's not something that I want to do all my life. Like, trust me, when I go home on the weekend, I'm not like, yo, I can't wait to work on parabolas. Like, that's just academically dishonest when we say that to our students. Do I want
Right.
to leave my job? No, I don't want to leave my job. I could probably conceive of a job that's amazing without being a professor in it, but I like them. It's not like a current like, oh, if I could only leave my
Right.
job, that'd be so great. No, I'm not in that situation. But at the same time, it's like getting to land of imagination as part of my day-to-day job is the part that I'm looking forward to. I'm not looking to, oh, I can't wait to get in and correct math.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we got to stop that.
Well, to your point about the conference, yeah, these are the moments I like to talk about because yeah, if I was you, I've been the same way. Like, yeah, whenever, wherever I go, whenever people ask me to speak, I don't know if they like know, but I hope
It's
you
coming.
know that like, oh, this is the guy who doesn't say what other people say. Like, I'll just be in meetings. I'll be like, can we tell the truth now? I was just like, can we speak truth? Because like, what are y'all talking about? Like after the Charlottesville events here, we went to this meeting and I said, hey, has anybody? As I heard a lot of proposals that you guys want to do after this, Unite the Right rally. I said, has anybody even mentioned the word listening? And everybody was like, I was like, oh, okay. So nobody else is. So like you're saying, like everyone is tunnel visioned or on this line, and then you can feel the fear. Like you're like when you get up on stage, everybody's like, oh, like please stay in the lane, stay in the lane, pro, because we did all this photonic stuff and quantum stuff. and we know you're cool and all, but don't get too cool. Like, don't go too tangential. Like, if you do get tangential, you got to be kind of like corny with it and like bring it back really quick. Hey guys, yo, tangent,
Keep
my
it
man
light.
went ha 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 ha. Yo, can't stand it. We got photons on the planet. All right, enough, y'all. Okay, so anyways, back to like that's what everybody does.
Mhm.
It's like we can be funny, tell a little joke, but that's just a little light. It's oh, this is good. This is a false tangent. Like, people are okay with false tangents.
Mhm.
Like,
Is
if
it a
you're doing a
cotangent? Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
co-tangent, like if you're doing a speech or a sermon, like there's always this moment where people tell a joke and you can tell instantly they're like, uh-oh, this is getting too silly. And I'm like, no, that's where we need to go. Like, we need to go there because that's where the interesting stuff is. That's where the truth, the funny is, or whatever that we're missing is, because you're keeping me on this and I'm already tuned out
Mhm.
because you're telling me what I already heard or what I already know. I
Mhm.
need to hear. So to me, the tangent, like you're saying about identity, it's like everybody has a core self, and then the offshoots, those tangents, are the exploration
Yeah.
or the new discoveries about oneself. And that's all I care about. When I go
All
to
what's what
church,
I'm there for.
yeah, when I go to church, I'm like, I want to hear what you have to say about this. I
Mhm.
heard the preacher. I even with the preacher, like, that's cool. You taught me the scripture. What does that mean to you? Like,
Mhm.
tell me your metaphor,
Bro,
because that's the richness.
it's like we have this argument all the time. So, and I do got to wrap this up quick. So let me say it like this: this is the crux of everything in science or in STEM, and I'll use the quantum example. In quantum, the big payoff, right, is particles can be in two places at the same time. And there's
Right.
something called the EPR paradox. There's the Einstein. I really don't want to go there, but I'm fighting myself not to do it. But Podensky and Rose, whatever, they all got together and they said this interpretation. You might have heard the Copenhagen interpretation, right? So this interpretation that something can be in the same place and it can communicate faster than the speed of light. There has to be some information missing. Einstein's like, the speed of light is fixed. There's no way that information can go from point A to point B instantaneously, no matter how far away it is separated. Yet, thousands and thousands of replicas. It's the most performed experiment there is in physics, right? It's been performed countless times. And every single time it comes up that the particle does communicate information. If this one's up, this one's down. Okay.
Mhm.
Instantly. There's this correlation that's undeniable. We never talk about that at the conferences. We said because we only want the hard science. And when it's in this gray area where it's the thing that attracts all the scientists to the field, but then you're supposed to shut up and calculate. No, don't talk about that because you don't know. Okay, but there's a double slit experiment that we can do, and we can see that the electron went through both slits at the same freaking time. There's a classic interference pattern going on. What is the explanation for this? We all want to talk about it. Either the electron went through both windows at the same time, or a particle can be a wave at the same time, which is one way of maybe another way of saying the same thing. It could go through it, right? Or we're in the multiverse. The
Right.
multiverse is on equal footing as the proposed solution among all respectable physicists in the world. And we never talk about it. Yo, the multiverse is potentially real. And we have no evidence to refute it. In fact, the evidence looks about 50-50. And to all these kids sitting in the crowd, we're talking about stuff they have no idea. We literally were talking about supply chain and quantum stacks, and we're talking about project management and a little bit of careers and some of the stuff that might excite them, right? And hey, why this is so hot. No one comes on a stage and go, hey, did you know time travel might be possible? Quantum is the area you want to look at, right? Like, did you know the multiverse might be real? I do. Every time you let me on stage, that's what's going to happen. Pro's going to get up there and he's going to talk
Right.
about science fiction because that's what got me into it.
Exactly.
Right? I wanted to do more math so I can understand if the science fiction is fiction or if it's science.
Right.
Right? And we, the imagination of all the kids right there, we're like, we got to go find something else, dress it up in a suit. And this dude who's a world-renowned expert gets on stage and he starts talking to them like they're 35. And you can tell he's trying to do what you're talking about. He's like, oh, let's give a few light things. let's give a couple. But anything that's really cool, he doesn't go near it. He walks way
Right.
back from that wall. And he's all dressed up, suit and tie. He looked like freaking Steve Jobs on stage, trying to be the cool guy, talking about tech or whatever. And you can see he's like laughing. He's like, oh, I know I'll lose him here if I talk too much science. So let me keep it light. Right. And he's doing the best he can, but it's still, no offense, it still came off as a typical egghead trying to talk to students. And I'm like, Joe, just come out and say, bro, imagine that the particles here and here at the same freaking time. And he, like you said, I want to know what you think. What do you think could be behind this? And now, as a good sell, wouldn't it be like, hey, now we're just going to teach you a little bit of the math and science so you can at least be involved in the argument. That's what my whole freaking TED Talk was about.
So simple.
Just a couple things you need so that your opinion matters. I say in the TED Talk, if you haven't had calculus, you don't have an opinion on it. All this cool, I say cool crap in the TED. All this cool crap that we're talking about, you don't get to talk about until you've done this over here. So I'm trying to use it as a motivator for you to do it so that you can get to the cool stuff. But I'm telling you, the cool stuff's out there up front. They're like, let's do all this stuff. And then later, you know, someday we might get to something cool. I'm like, no, start with the dessert. You know,
well, the last thing I'll say to all the stuff you just said and all other stuff you said, I'll put it in the comments. Newer. I like doing this now. Tangential literacy. This is the problem. There's no tangential literacy because what you're explaining is the person on stage is like, ooh, I want to go here. And I know I could go here, but ooh, everyone in the audience probably can't follow because you don't teach kids or anyone to follow their passion, their curiosity, their tangents. Oh, that's a tangent. Shut that up. So over time, people just get used to not following tangents and they get used to judging people on stage for going on tangents. And like you're saying, but that's where all the interesting stuff is. So while the person is on stage, they're thinking, I could go here and capture this person's imagination, but the person who hired me, yeah, I got to keep it strictly, you know, I got to keep it strict to the science, et cetera, et cetera. So we just need more tangential literacy. That's what I'm gonna say.
I like that term. I like that term a lot. I think we're gonna use that. Have you seen this picture? Let me give you the color version. This was shown there. I knew it was going to be. It's always shown. And how people present this is the make or break point. So this picture.
I don't know if I have seen this.
So this is Madame Mary Curie, right? And this is her. Hold on. Let's get the big picture we're looking for. Where'd it go? I should have just went straight to the picture instead of the article. No. I know I got the no. Thank you. Let me go back. Let me just blow it up. Oops, I didn't blow it up. Okay, here's her head in color. Anyways, let's see if I visit this so we can get the full picture. Yeah, there we go. So. I still need to make that bigger. All right, is that better?
No, it's just the same. I'm just saying like the Google search part still.
Oh, okay. Then I have to stop sharing and then share again now that I have the right one. This one. Okay. So that picture.
All right.
So that's Mary Curie, right? With her fellow Nobel Prize esteemed panel of scientists, right? Now, when you look in there, you see some huge heavyweights and so forth, like Albert Einstein's right in the middle, blah, 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 right? But the point is, that's the diversity that you had in science, right? But the thing is, what they did at this quantum panel, which was great, they showed a recent photo,
right?
And when they were announcing Nobel, it's the same picture. It is like one woman in the whole crowd. There's like 2 or 3 Asian dudes in the crowd. There's like maybe a black person. It's kind of hard to tell. He might be Indian, right? And then and there's a couple clearly like Asian, Indian kind of looking people from this picture, and it's a sea of whiteness, and it's a sea of white male, right? And so it looks just like this picture, and it's like, bro, 100 years, nothing changed. It's like, and they get up on stage and they say the same message the same
Yep.
way, suck out
Yep.
all the creativity while
Yep.
saying we need more diversity in STEM and do nothing diverse to attract them. And they still look at it as like, oh, we're not going to do your hip hop crap. Oh, that's a funny gimmick. Ha ha. You know, and it's like poo pooed upon, right? And
Right.
it's like, oh, sorry, Tree. I just saw your message. She's not feeling well. Yeah, you got to get that food. But it's like, what are you doing? You know, it's like, well, what are you freaking doing? And some guy, and I referenced him on the second day, he gets up at the conference and he goes, all this crap is lip talk, lip service. He's like, and this dude is a venture capitalist, right? And he's pissed off, real kind of dignified, right? And like older gentleman, black man, right? And he's like, I'm a freaking venture capitalist and y'all are full of crap. And my son is all pissed off and wants to, he was in tears, the lack of diversity in STEM. I didn't catch his whole comment. I walked back into the room when he was speaking, but I'm like, finally, someone's going off. Like you said, can we get to the real, like, this is all lip service, right? Like y'all did nothing to try to attract the imaginations of the people that were here, you know, nothing. And by the way, when we're talking about the students that were there, it was an HBCU, right? It's an HBCU, and they don't think maybe like, is it too offensive to mention the hip hop might fly at an HBCU? Dude, it's gonna fly at a PWI.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I made the decision recently. Like, yeah, every proposal I'm doing, like, I'm not wording anything differently now. I'm just like, no, we're bringing hip hop.
Right.
Like, I'm just in every proposal. I'm like, you don't like it? Too bad, because that's the problem. Like, you're trying to like censor out the very word. Like people say, oh shoot, how should we word this like relevant? No, hip hop. I'm like, no, we're bringing the beats and the rhymes, and if that doesn't appeal to you, then don't give me the grant. But
right,
this is what we need.
I don't need to be here. Yeah, right.
This is what we need. Right. This is you want people of a certain culture. You have to actually have the culture.
Right. And you know what the best part about the intersectionalities of those cultures? It's endless. It's like, okay, first of all, anybody under 1 million should like or be familiar with hip hop. And if you're not, like, there's no age right now where hip hop should be dominant, right? Because it's like, we do the math and it's like started in like what, 72? And it's like, okay, how many people were 30 in 72 are still alive? Okay, so it's people who were born in 42. Plenty of people who are around 80, right? But not a whole heck of a lot of them out of conferences. So the 80-year-olds at the conference were 30 when hip hop was created. So you had to go specifically out of your way to avoid hip hop at this point in life. It's like what people sometimes say about the gospel. It's like, it's like you had to go out of your way to not have a chance to have heard it, right? And for most situations, of course, there's always going to be exceptions, but you had to go out of your way to avoid. And if you've done that,
oh, we lost your audio because you kicked yourself out. Yeah, I mean, I'm done if you're done. So Pro will now lip sync to my words. He will match my audio with his words. He said, yeah, you got to go out of your way to not be involved with hip hop. You got to be lying. You know what I'm saying? If I'm lying, I'm flying. So what we're saying is, if you are boring and your students are bored, it's because you're missing hip hop. Pro said big facts. All right, well, I think we're going to get out of here. Peace.